Thank you very much, Michael, for the opportunity. And would you like to say a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, Richard. Thanks for the opportunity to me as well. The Commercial Spaceflight Federation represents about 45 companies or so that are in various roles in the commercial spaceflight industry, and they include companies that are developing vehicles for orbital flight, for suborbital flight, for near space, and for beyond low Earth orbit. And we are trying to influence public policy to make basically the industry move its agenda forward.
And in light of Russia and China signing the 49, matter of fact, cooperation deals, how will it affect Russia and the United States space cooperation going forward?
Well, I mean, I think it's a consideration, but our administration has taken a pretty specific stance toward China and as regards space. Obviously, the ITAR is a very big factor when it comes to cooperating with them, and NASA has sort of been prohibited from dealing with them on the International Space Station. Now, whether the deals between China and Russia change that equation to some degree remains to be seen. I think that there are some voices within our industry that are calling for a greater cooperation with China. But this is obviously a government decision, which we'll just have to see what happens.
Can you outline from your firsthand experience, for example, the importance of Russian space cooperation in light of U.S. companies like SpaceX and, of course, Orbital Sciences replacing the resupply function process for the ISS, going beyond 2015?
Well, I should clarify that they haven't really replaced that capability, just complemented it. So now we have different vehicles. We still have the Russian vehicle. We have a European ATV that's taking cargo. We have the Japanese HTV that's taking cargo. And now we have two American providers that you mentioned, SpaceX and Orbital Sciences. So this is all a good thing because redundancy is important. Operational redundancy is, and dissimilar redundancy is something that are very helpful to have, and but at the same time, we've sort of established this capability in the commercial world in the U.S., which I think will be well served for in the future.
Can you tell us of your vision, for U.S. space commerce? What's your vision?
Well, I think, in the not too distant future, we will see a thriving commercial economy in low Earth orbit. As I mentioned, transportation should be well established both for cargo and for people. And also we'll have destinations. Those destinations could be laboratories for companies. They could be national space stations for other countries. They could be destinations for tourism, for instance, a hotel that you may want to go to. And of course, beyond low Earth orbit, there are other opportunities. We've heard about the resource utilization ideas on asteroids or on the lunar surface. So these are all things whose time is coming.
Well, Orion, of course, is NASA's next exploration spacecraft designed to carry some of the astronauts, hopefully maybe you want to go back in space, we'll talk about that in a minute, to destinations in deep space, including an asteroid and perhaps Mars. Do you see any commercial private firms that will be competing with the Orion mission?
Well, I think that there have been some expressions of interest in going beyond LEO with commercial ventures. I don't think you'll see government participation in that because, that's what they've decided that Orion is going to be the vehicle for crew for them for the foreseeable future. But there has been talk in the press about a company called Space Adventures offering a trip around the moon, not to land on the moon, but around the moon in a modified Soyuz vehicle. There is a company that's interested, called Golden Spike Corporation, that's interested in bringing humans to the surface of the moon in a commercial way. So I don't know if you consider those competitors to Orion. I think there are different. One is exploration or pioneering, as they're calling it now, and the other is commerce. So they're not necessarily competitors, but there may be more than one vehicle in the beyond LEO space coming up.
So what's the first step in the frontier cycle, namely robotics, observational, deep space programs? They've already begun, as you know. Will global societies and governments have the will and the economic resources to enter the second step, if you will, of deep space exploration, human missions? You might have answered some of that question, by the way.
Well, I think the answer is yes. If you compare it to the pace that was around in the 1960s in Apollo and the space race with the Soviet Union at the time, it's very different. But we have been sending a steady stream of probes and robotic to other places, notably Mars, and I expect that to continue. Recently NASA has reiterated that is what they call the Horizon goal, is going to Mars with people. And you absolutely need to do those baby steps first. You need to go there with observations, with robotics, with probably sample return. And people will come after it, but it's a very expensive proposition. Mars is a long way away. There may be some appetite to return to the moon, but to do it in more of a pioneering way rather than exploration. So you could argue that Apollo was an exploratory program. We went there, we planted the flag, we took some samples, etc. But now we want to pioneer. We want to go there and start, trying to quote unquote live off the land to some degree, to have a longer and longer presence as we do now in low Earth orbit, and learn what we can learn. And it's probably a wise thing to do before we ever attempt to do such a thing on Mars.
I see. Well, do you think the final third step, if you will, permanent outer space human settlements, will become a reality? And if so, what is your idea of a date that this will happen? Do you project a date for everyone?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. The first question is easy. Yes, I think it'll be a reality. The second one, I wouldn't venture to guess when we start having people leave the planet without plans of coming back. I think that's probably a generation or two away. But it's coming. These things are nonlinear and they're difficult to predict. If you were to ask somebody 100 years ago where we'd be today in terms of transportation, in terms of what we're able to do with computer processors, etc., they could not have predicted in a million years. So I don't want to go on record because I'm sure I'll be wrong.
Well, do you have any final comments? I know that you really had a really great career. You were in space. It must have been a great experience. Have you thought about going back into space? You have some final comments.
Look, going to space is a real privilege. I was extremely fortunate to be able to do it in my NASA career. I'd love to go back. I'd love to go back in a commercial way, either as a crew member or perhaps as a client, if you will. I'm not sure when that might be or what the destination might be, but it's a very exciting time in commercial space now. We've got, as we described, the threshold of suborbital operations. I think we'll see orbital operations with carrying NASA astronauts to the ISS in the not too distant future. After that, you could see some habitat, some commercial space stations, and so next 10 years are definitely going to be ones worth waiting to see what happens.